Maxine Drake, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Austin. I'm excited to be here.
I am delighted to have you. So listeners, viewers, folks across the globe, you marvelous men, you wonderful women, ladies and listeners, and all the like, today's show might be the silver bullet you have been looking for when it comes to scaling your practice from a hiring and staffing perspective. So, to orient the show today, I think that if you're not growing, you're dying, and you're in a war against entropy or stagnation. And the problem is really that because scientists to date have not found a way to clone humans, you necessarily have to hire when the time is right. So this episode is going to be devoted to principally focusing in on, well, let's call it your ultimate guide to expanding your aesthetic practice with the team. So that is a starting point. Maxine, maybe we can begin with some of the precursors to knowing when, hey, it's time to scale our staff and begin the considerations of hiring. How do we know it's time to start thinking about this topic?
You know, Austin, that's a really good question. When is it time to hire? And we like to use the word team and not staff because there are staff infections. So we use the word team. And when is it the right time? Well, a good indicator is if you are a solo practitioner, whether you are a massage therapist or a esthetician, and you are booked several months out, and you're like, I'm not taking any new clients. That might be a really good indicator that you've done a lot of things right and people love you and want your services. And now it's time to bring on another team member to duplicate that process.
So perhaps the analogy would be you're in a space, a room. The floor keeps raising, but the ceiling does not. And you're getting more and more constrained as evidenced by your calendar. And you're having to turn clients away. Maybe that's the cue to look out for.
It is.
Hey, it's time.
It is. That is one. Another might be, well, what is your exit strategy? How long do you see yourself in the treatment room servicing clients? Are you getting burned out? Do you want a little bit more? I don't necessarily believe in work-life balance. I think it's all connected. However, maybe you want to cut down on hours or days in the treatment room. Maybe you would like to take a vacation and have revenue still coming in. So these are just really great things to think about because everybody wants something different for their business. So really honoring what it is that you want for your business. But these are really great indicators that it may be time to bring on some team members to help you.
You alluded to a disruptive way of thinking about work life, what most would consider balance. Now, I've heard it as a contrarian viewpoint that the better way to think of it is work-life integration. Is that in line with what you meant by that, or what do you mean when you say that their work and life are all connected? Because this might help influence the way people think about their work.
I do. I don't think it's necessarily separate. I think that who we are in one thing is who we are in all. And work is an extension of who we are. And that career choice and that path, and maybe it's change. That's why there's a lot of massage. I'm a massage therapist first and then an esthetician, right? And there's a lot of nurses that get into aesthetics then, or, so it's just an extension of who we are. And so we love our work and it becomes part of our life.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering
Mhm.
if there's some different way of, in line with what you're saying, thinking about the nature of work such that it lends to your not being probabilistically predisposed to burnout. I'm thinking of some friends that I have that are nurses in the ER. Now, of course, this is not the exact same swim lane as aesthetics or massage therapy and the like, but it seems like a common pattern of humans, let's say, which is if they do not have the correct comportment towards work and to thinking of what work is and means to them, et cetera, they're likely to find themselves in a state of burnout. And I'm wondering if thinking about work and life in the manner of which you're suggesting, so something like integrating the two, where they're not disjointed, if there's some way to liberate oneself from the possibility or reduce the odds of burnout, which I think a lot of therapists face. Anyone who's working with their hands in beauty, they're predisposed to that probabilistically. So is there something to be said about shifting the way in which we think about work? Because this is really the precursor to deciding, do I really need to hire or not? There's
Mhm.
something there, you think?
I think that, like, you use nurses as an example, and they don't necessarily own the business, but they are showing up for a job, a duty, a service. And so when a service provider, such as an esthetician or a massage therapist, chooses to open her own practice, it is usually for a multitude of reasons. They are visionaries, they are entrepreneurs, they want to live life on their own terms, whatever that is. They're not just showing up for a job. And so, with that said, so that we don't experience burnout, there's a bunch of other practices, and I don't want to go down the self care rabbit hole, but doing things to center yourself, um, not deplete your energy. And then also know that as an entrepreneur, as an owner, you can't do it all. And so the things that you're not good at, can we maybe delegate those out? And so now we're talking about two different things. One is, when do you know it's time to hire? And we use the first example of, well, if you're booked X amount of months out or what have you. But the other is also recognizing your own talents and the things and the strengths that you're really good at, and what you're not good at or you don't like doing. Because whatever we don't like doing, very rarely will we be good at it.
Right, right.
And so that is also a great indicator to go, wow, for this next growth spurt, I need to bring on a marketing team. Or maybe it's as simple as, I need to bring on a CPA. I need to bring in guest services, front desk help first. So sales, there's a struggle or a disconnect with sales and estheticians and massage therapists. They're naturally excellent at sales. A lot of them don't realize they are. They're natural educators, and there's nothing more powerful than a consultative, um, coming from that sales portion, from a consultative or an educational aspect. And so we're kind of going lateral here, it's a really good point, Austin. What can you delegate out that where you're kind of falling down on in your business?
Yeah. Because this
Mhm.
certainly seems to be a necessity to understand the boundaries of your circle of competence. For example, yesterday I had on Brian Lobig, who is a marketing genius,
Mhm.
and uh, there are things of which he knows how to do and implement technically that the esthetician, lash studio owner, whatever, would be completely clueless to, nor even have the interest to learn, because it's not within the number one circle of competency, but number two, the circle of interest as well. So these are all, I think, some of the precursors that people ought to think about as they're deciding, okay, I want to scale, I need additional teammates, let's say.
Mhm.
And the next question that follows, and we'll get into this perhaps later on, are things like, well, how do I know for what, and not just whom to hire, but for what do I hire? CPA? Do I hire another esthetician to tap me out when I'm overwhelmed and want to take a holiday or take a vacation, etc.? And I think if the thrust of today's show is going to be devoted to scaling up a team
Mhm.
with the view of effectively cloning yourself so that you can be liberated from the tyranny of non-holidays and no vacation time, because you have no time, because your calendar is so booked that you need someone to do your facials, etc., for you. And you've arrived at that decision that it's time. It seems like the next logical step would be to, before you make the decision to act on that and put up a listing on Indeed or what have you, is to do a bit of self-inventory and self-assessment, to ask yourself this one question: do I actually have what it takes to lead a team or not? And I think the story of the baker here from the book E-Myth might be fitting to illustrate this point.
Yes, I love the story of the baker from the E-Myth. It's a great read. And I think a lot of estheticians can probably relate to it. She was a fabulous baker that worked for someone else, and she saw how successful the bakery was and was like, okay, well, why don't I just open up my own and I'll just make all of the money? And so really the premise of the story is that she's very good at her craft, but not necessarily good on the business side, and had to get some coaching and some help to help round out those skills on the business side. So as far as like hiring, though, that's a little bit separate. I think a starting point is really understanding where you're sitting in your business. We want to be making sure that we're looking at the dashboard at least once a week, looking at your numbers, looking at your service numbers, looking at your retail numbers, looking at how many clients you're servicing, looking at your retention rates. And all of those things. There's some things you want to get in place before you, I think psychologically, before you just jump and, like you said, Austin, just put that ad out there and be like, all right, well, I'm going to wing this and see what happens. And it's really that we how do I say this to my people that I coach? I go, you have a coach, that would be me, and now you become a coach. And so it's not just as simple as bringing somebody on your team and being like, all right, well, you're supposed to know what to do, and like throw them out to the wolves and let's see if they'll sink or swim. There's a process to that. When I had my team, I had 19 employees, and I held monthly meetings. Now, the monthly meetings were always uplifting. They were never like gripe sessions. They were centered around the success of the spa and maybe any specials we were running or new people on the team, what have you. And I reserved the individual meetings for each employee and gave them their own time. So it's not, yes, I would run reports and see how they were doing as far as all of the numbers that we just were talking about: service, retention, requests, retail sales. But really the first question out of my mouth when they would come into my office would be, how are you? What's going on in your life? And when you are vested in your people, they know it. We can't just expect them to be production machines because they are just as human as you and I. And so keeping that in mind and really being vested in their life and what are their goals and what are their talents and what are the things that they bring to the table and to the business naturally. And then of course you're gonna, well, the main objective is growth, and we are going to look at numbers, but it's really recognizing the individual first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it reminds me of a book on coaching that I read. It was extremely, it's called The Coaching Habit,
Ooh.
which is a fantastic read, listeners and viewers, if you haven't heard of that book. The author effectively advocates leading your one-to-ones with your staffing, but now you haven't had me thinking of staph infections.
I'll have you changing that word up now, Austin.
Exactly. But it has me thinking of one-to-ones with your team. And if you operate from a position of trust in knowing that because you found a way to get them involved in the ownership of the outcome, which there's all sorts of strategies you can deploy to involve them, namely in decision making. Should we go this way or that way? Let's debate. And then they have ownership of the outcome in some sense, or equity in the practice if you're brave, let's say, and in a position to do that. But the thing that was shocking to me about that book, and this is a bit more post I have hired someone, and we'll rewind back to asking the questions and knowing when it's time to actually hire or not. But since we're on the note, the author advocates, instead of, who's the CEO of Intel, Andy Groves, I believe. I think his approach to management was you lead with the numbers. So in the selling environment, hey, you're behind. You only created X amount of opportunities. And then the team, or the subordinate, the team member, now I'm desperately avoiding the word staff, that you oversee, let's say, they, with that approach, they find themselves in this defensive crouch, and growth doesn't tend to happen because there's not as much safety. Whereas if you approach them from hey, what is on your mind? They share, they generally will verbally vomit at you. And then you invite them to disclose more by saying, okay, great, what else? And that generally will produce more, which you would think sounds unsurprising, but practice that with your team. And then lastly, you would ask them point blank, okay, of these things, what is the biggest challenge that you're faced with? And let's explore how to resolve that. That to me has been a much more impactful way to lead than you're behind on your number. Why? Oh my God, defensive crouch. Nothing happens because there's no safety. So I think you hit on a great point. But if we dovetail back to the question, how do I know I have the chops to lead a team? Where now this is a piece you mentioned earlier from Harvard Business Review, that only 13% of individuals are actually, let's say, genetically predisposed, et cetera, to actually function as an owner, because they are different functions, being the worker bee versus the owner bee, let's say, the queen bee. How do I know I'm ready? If I'm in a position where my calendar is completely booked, maybe that's okay. Maybe I have reached the ceiling and that's, where I'm content, or maybe I'm deliberating. But maybe if I'm being honest with myself, I should stay in that position where I don't need to hire because I don't have the comportment for it. How do I think about that?
Yes, it's a really good self-realization to kind of sit back and say, well, what kind of a leader am I? How do I lead? How do I process things like, how am I strategic? How do I motivate people? Because you hit the nail on the head with trust. And there comes a time, if you're thinking, well, like, a lot of owners out there that I see in different groups, because that's where I get a lot of my material. Like, oh, no, I will never bring anybody on board because they're just going to steal all my clients and go open up their own thing. Well, if we bring the right person on the bus, then, and what I mean by that, that's a Jim Collins Good to Great.
Good to Great, yeah.
That's a great read. And he really is just like, the most important thing is bringing the right person on the bus. But to circle back to your initial question, is really having a conversation with yourself to say, well, what kind of leader am I? Can I relinquish? Can I trust someone else if it was the right person? And I think most of us would say yes. And then, do I have the ability to coach them, to mentor them, to help them bring out their best talents, and put them in a position where those talents are going to shine, and be very happy. There was another, oh gosh, I want to say it's in a different book, and I know we both do a lot of reading, Austin, and I think it was in the book, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And it's like like the vertical promotion is just so wrong. Because it's like thinking that the housekeeping at the Ritz-Carlton, definitely they're going to want to get out of the housekeeping, because why would they want to stay in housekeeping? They're going to want to promote out of that and move to, I don't know, valet or front desk, and the thing is that you interview someone in housekeeping, they're like, are you kidding? I love making things look sparkly and fresh. I get to plug in my headphones. I work alone, and I make things beautiful for the next guest that comes in. Well, who are we to say, like, and that is their that they love that. So why, so I kind of went down a rabbit hole. However, the thing is that when we bring the right people on, the point is, and we are hiring for that specific talent of who they are, and we're able to recognize that talent, and then we do hire them, the first thing we have to do is trust that who we just hired, we have to trust that,
Reminds me of a tweet from Naval Ravikant, who I, for whatever reason, happen to cite often here, mostly because he's a modern day Buddha by my estimation. But he has this idea that in the collection of his writings called the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is a fantastic read. I would suggest the audience pick up a copy of that, even though he's in the tech universe of Silicon Valley. A lot of his ideas are applicable in any domain. But one of them in particular is you should never work with someone for 5 minutes who you would not see yourself working with for 5 years.
Love it. Love it. Here's the thing. Okay, so think about, and I love that, because think about your A-list clients, right? What makes them your A-list clients? And we know the ones. We see them on the book and we're like, oh my God, I can't wait to see Austin. I love him. I can't wait to see him, see what's going on in his life, take care of him, serve, and then we look at maybe C or D list clients on our list. We're like, oh, they're so draining, right? Well, we are looking, the only difference between an A-list client and the right person we bring on our team is the title. So I love that, Austin. And if we think about it like that, we are very clear on our company mission. We're very clear on who we serve in our community. We are calling people to help us live out this mission. and people go, oh my God, I have to work for Austin. He is just, I love the company mission. I love what they're about. I want to be on that team because I believe the same thing. And then, that's like, one of the indicators, but, so yeah, I love that. Your audience is getting some great reading material. So hopefully they're jotting down all these book titles because it's fabulous.
Well, it's your fault. It is your fault, Maxine. If this show ends up being fabulous, it is not my fault. It is your fault.
Aw.
I can't resist asking the next question, which is more of a, well, I mean, it is in line with the theme of the show. How do we then screen out the potential team members that are not 5-year types, the 5-minute types? How do we exclude those and screen for that in the hiring process? Are there any heuristics that you would suggest for that?
Well, I think, hire slowly and fire quickly, because the rest is pain and suffering. And when we take our time in the hiring process, we are asking key questions that are important to us as people, as you're keeping in mind your company mission, who you serve, and the talents you're looking for. What key characteristics do the people need to have in order to bring your mission to even greater life? So for example, you might be thinking, well, I need to bring on an awesome, salesperson. And quite honestly, we all should have that in the back of our mind, because each member we bring on our team should naturally have that professional salesperson running in the background. But what does that mean? We're really looking for someone that is excellent at building relationships. We're really looking for someone that is excellent at earning trust quickly in order to make those sales happen, right? So those are characteristics that you cannot teach. You can teach someone a skill, like how to operate one of your awesome devices, how to, that's a skill. However, the characteristics, those are formed by what, age 4? So we have to have a keen eye for the characteristics that we need to bring on our team to grow exponentially. And does that make sense? We're getting deep here, Austin. Is that okay?
Good. I like deep conversations. And hopefully the audience does too. If you don't, this is maybe not the show for you. How do I develop that keen intuition then? I mean, in some sense, you arguably can't. Maybe you can. Are there any things that you can do? As a guy who has made a drove of hiring mistakes myself, where there have been times where I had, within the first month, had to let someone go because I didn't think about, oh, what about like a technology aptitude? I just assumed that they would know how to do this, that, or the other. Are there ways that we can develop that intuition? Because this is really a case, in some sense, for intuition, it seems.
I think it's, and that's a talent in itself. And you and I were kind of talking about this before we started the show, on just an awareness or having a spidey sense. And, and someone like my husband, who is like, I got to bring out the spreadsheets to do the data, so wherever your natural ability is, as far as if you do have and most, Austin, most estheticians and massage therapists are empaths, and they're in tune on some level. So really trusting that, but we're asking the right questions and we're really watching the behavior. I used to say, and I failed miserably at hiring, which is why I had to put together a system that I could hold myself accountable to, because you and I both have been like, probably, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but you interview someone, you're like, oh my God, they're like, okay, they're perfect. All right, that's a done deal. They're hired. And we didn't really take our time and ponder the answers to the questions that they answered in that particular interview. Sit with it, go over it, invite them back, and really slow down that process and be like, okay, well, they answered this and this. Well, now I've provoked some other questions that I really would like the answers to. And when we do fail, like you said, oh my gosh, the technological side of things, now you learned, because now what are you adding to your next interview process? Oh, you betcha you're adding those questions, right? So we live and we learn. I've put together a complete, I literally, every time I coach on it, also, Austin, I'm like, they're just really good psychology questions on taking initiative, about sales, about team playing, like all these things that might be important in the spa world. And so we just have to really pay attention to the answers, and we have to believe them. We have to believe them. We have to believe that what they're saying is true. Not like, oh, well, I think, and create a story, And a lot of us do that, we'll do that, we'll get a vibe, we'll like, so, I mean, and some people get really nervous in the interview too. Like some people interview well and they could maybe pull the wool over our eyes. And then there's some that are really nervous and maybe they're awesome, but they're just nervous and they're not answering quite the way you envisioned. And so just slow down that process and really, and listen, I say too, to practice, if you have some hits on your ads, then go through the process, even though you're not really impressed maybe with their resume. There's nothing wrong with practicing. I really don't see anything wrong with that. So you probably yourself, Austin, have a keener awareness with the amount of interviews you've performed now, and you've changed up your questioning, or someone will answer. And then by the way they answer, because I'll coach someone, they're like, well, what do I ask them next after? And I'm like, well, base it off of how they answer. And if it's piques your interest of, well, wait a minute, can you dive deeper on that? And the other thing that we really want to pay attention to on the resume is if we do get resumes first, is calling previous employers. How many actually do that? We're afraid to do that. And call and ask questions. Is this candidate eligible for rehire? Oh, heck no. You know what I mean? If they say it like that, I mean, pay attention to how they're answering. Oh my gosh, I love that person. I was so sad to see her move away. Like she was such an asset to our team, but call and inquire. Call and inquire. You would be amazed at how many people will give you information they probably shouldn't, but it's really true. I mean, really the only HR question we can ask is, are they eligible for rehire? If we ask them to expand upon that, whether they have an HR background or not, will determine how they answer that. But try to get as much info as you can, because that's going to give you insight.
That seems like a fantastic vehicle, or
Mhm.
perhaps the right metaphor would be acid, for exposing the truth, because there are professional interviewers, which is
Mhm.
almost a red flag if they're so ported and polished, it would seem,
Mm.
to where just calling their previous employer and asking point blank seems like a much more reliable gauge of fitness, let's say, for their station.
Mhm. It could be. It could be. Here's the caveat to that, is maybe they weren't a good fit in that culture or environment, but they would be in yours. So there's caveats to it. So you want to take it with a grain of salt. Um, you know, do you know what I mean by that? So
Yeah.
it really can be, it's a little bit more involved. It's not as cut and dry as we'd like to think. I know we want answers, and we want like this process that's tried and true, like, and the thing is that I think we get better. We have to fail at a few. And if we do, it's okay. If you bring the wrong person on the bus, just get rid of them quickly. Get rid of them quickly. That is my best advice, is to make sure you get them off the bus quickly, because now they're going to infect the rest of the team if you have, or it just really upsets the entire culture. So
That begs the question then, what is the right way to architect your culture? Because it seems like, similar to the discussion I had a couple of days back with Carolyn on interior design, and how if you do not design your space intentionally, it will
mhm,
design you, or architect you, you could say. I think
mhm,
similarly, if you're not intentional about your culture formation, it will form you, and
mhm.
you will have no control over it. And so, what are some of the ways in which you can think through what your culture should be like? Because this is another precursor to the interviewing that that will shape and influence the questions and of which you ask, and equally what you're sniffing out for in the hiring process.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, being intentional about your space. I think for the sake of owning your business, you really have to know, what is your belief system? What is your philosophy? How do you do business? What separates you from the spot on the block? And really standing firm in your philosophy and belief system. It doesn't mean that you want to hire a mini you. There's only one you, right? However, the different spices make the awesome soup, right? So what's missing, or maybe, again, maybe something you're falling down on as an owner or practitioner yourself, that you would like to see in another practitioner, to just bring that awesome spice to the soup. So I think you really have to be solid in your philosophy and your belief system, and the way you do things is so unique, and it stands out, and it separates you from the rest. And be very, very clear on that. And it's very intentional also, writing out your mission. Um, and because you are going to align your team around your mission, and they need to know why they're giving up hours of their life to help your vision come true. Does that make sense? And
Is there also a place in the interview process, you think, for um, almost trying to talk them out of working with you? And what I mean by that specifically is to say,
mhm,
for example, let's say that you have codified your values, and let's say you've decided that there are 5 So for
Mhm.
Artemis, one of them
Mhm.
is have fun. Another is be true.
Mhm.
So perhaps in the interview process, let's say have fun is one of your values, like it is for us. If you get the sense that the character, the qualia of the person you're speaking to is the antithesis of that, maybe they're just a stump on a log and it's just, no, you're not going to fit in. It's actually, it seems like a disservice to
Right.
them, frankly, to invite
Mhm.
them in. So
Correct.
is the first step then in this, well, a step in this process, something like codifying, like you said, your philosophy, your values, and
Mhm.
then essentially, I don't want to say try to talk them out of working with you, but something like, let's say to be true example, um, maybe in your interview process, you ask them a question of some sort of a core that is like, when is the last time you lied to a customer? If they can say honestly, yeah, I did last week. And then I realized in retrospect, oh my God, that was a mistake. And I called them back and fixed it. That's a way by proxy to sniff out whether or not they are of the accord, that they do believe that you ought be true. Because you can't, the problem with interview questions I've found is that I can't just ask the question, for example, hey, are you funny? Which is a terrible interview question anyway. But let's use the be true value instead, right? That we're optimizing for in the hiring process. I can't just ask them, hi, do you tell the truth? Because what idiot's going to say anything other than, yeah, of course I do. Right? They're not going to disclose that they don't tell the truth, because that's actually the liar's paradox. Right? When a liar tells you this statement is true,
Mhm.
liar's paradox. In other words, they're not going to tell you that they lie. So it's tricky because you have to ask questions that are lateral or oblique,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then you also equally have to figure out what your values are and the other bits of your pie, your philosophy puzzle, let's say. And then you've got to find a way to ask questions that evoke from them actual honest answers that they may not be aware they are answering honestly. And then equally, this is the last part, which is part of the question, and it is the question, how can we invite them to self-select out by way of almost talking them out of it? Hey, if you don't like humor, if you don't like being teased, this is not the place for you, sort of thing. Or a role
Mhm.
for that. How do you think about that, if at all?
If that's your style of 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 wanting to weed people out, then that's your style. I'm not going to say, oh no, like you can't try to set someone up like that. However, I do like the open-ended questions. I do like, but I would just say, like, they just don't get called back. Like, why do we have to make them feel bad because they don't fit? You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to call them out right then and there because they don't fit? You know, I just think that, like, not getting a call back is also communication. I don't necessarily think we have to tell them why. Do you?
Sure. I'm just thinking
I don't
more.
know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just like a kind bone in my, but it's because now they're like, oh my gosh, like now my next interview I gotta be funny, or I gotta portray that I'm fun, or whatever. I don't know. And but I think asking the questions that are important to you in your business, so things like, you know, tell me how you feel about sales. And they're like, oh God, like, so it's going to give you an indicator. Tell me about a time when you came up with a really good idea. How did you present it? What was the outcome?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about a time when you had to do something differently and think quick on your feet, and like, what was the outcome? So you're looking for, like, initiative there, or but I think sales is we have to ask those underlying sales questions, regardless of what the position is at the spa, because I think each team member is kind of responsible for either any kind of cross marketing or upselling or what have you, and they can't have a barrier there with sales. So really uncovering that, which quite honestly, Austin, was one of my big things in interview. And I used to go recruit. So how I used to find my front desk. So my front desk guest services, I'd go recruit at the mall. And I would go over to the cosmetic counters of like Clarins and Estee Lauder. First of all the girls are polished. A lot of them are estheticians, and they are excellent at sales. All of them, or they don't keep their job. You know what I mean? So they have to produce. And so, yeah, I would go recruiting. So anyway, that's like for guest services, front desk kind of a scenario, but that just kind of gives you an idea. So I don't know about, if it's your style to ask, I don't want to call them trick questions, but whatever your style is, if I'm not going to say it, and does it work? That's the key. Does it work for you? Are you able to consistently hire exactly what you need for your business with those key questions?
Fair. So let's change gears to the next gear as we trot along down the tracks here. So let's say that we have, number one, decided it's time to hire. We've gotten through the interview process. We've made some decisions on who to hire. How do I need to prepare for the implementation of additional seats on my team? What do I need to be thinking about?
Well, you want to prepare financially. So whatever revenue, if you're a solo operator, whatever revenue that you are currently generating, that's going to be cut. Because depending on the state you live in, and there's, all kinds of different models out there as far as compensation models. However, I will just give a hint that high commission structure compensation models are not sustainable, anymore. We're out of the 80s and the 90s, and it's not sustainable. You want to be prepared to train and onboard. You want to have things in place like employee handbook, standard operating procedures, the way you do things, your philosophy, your beliefs, which is the core of like your core values, right? So what does that look like? So that you have the training materials to bring someone on board. So before you even run the ad, you want to have those things in place so that you're prepared and you feel organized. And then when you do hire and you're like, all right, and you send that offer out to that candidate and they accept the position, you're very clear on the hours. You're very clear on, like, they know what is expected of them. You'd be surprised that a lot of owners, it's because they don't really know what to do to prepare, right? So what is expected of each employee when they come to work? What is expected of the new hire? What does your onboarding process look like? There's a lot of companies that is like, okay, unless you're going to boot camp, which, how long is boot camp?
Depends on the service. I did 8 weeks.
Right.
Time of my life.
Right. So that is a serious onboarding process. And what do you do in that onboarding? You're weeding out the people that don't cut it, right? Not that that's our goal in this, because the military operates a little bit different. However, We want to bring on someone and we want to help them win. So we want to give them the training to help them win. And it's longer than 3 days.
Yeah.
You know,
So the punchline there is you want to prepare before you even begin hiring with your SOPs, your pay structure, moving away from commission, perhaps supplanting that with an incentive structure that is bonus based. We're not in the 90s anymore. You want to be ready effectively to begin training the day you start interviewing and not getting the cart placed in front of the horse there.
You do. And you want to know how many hours of employment you can afford. You know, so I want to hire this esthetician and I want to give her 30 hours a week. Can I afford that? You know, I don't advise whatever your gross income is coming in, I don't advise you go above 45%.
Okay.
You know, and so if you're in that bracket or in that percentage, it'll be a little bit, you know, I mean, it might take them a while to where this employee is actually paying for him or herself. Does that make sense? And they're actually making money. So what kind of time have you allotted for that time period of where it's not an expense, but actually within 6 months, this employee will be not only paying for themselves, they will be generating X amount to the spa. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So I've gone through the let's say 3 of the 4 steps to this project of expanding my aesthetic practice by bolting on a team where I begin with the decision it's time to make some hires. I've gone through the interviewing process. I've gone through the preparatory, it's not the right word. I've prepared, English is hard, apparently. I've prepared for the rollouts of training, and perhaps I've even trained up my staff. Now it's month 3, month 6, and I'm realizing, oh my God, I have never read a book in my life on leadership. How do I develop my skills as a leader such that I can lead my team to take the practice from, say, 0 to 1?
You know, that's a really good question. And I know you and I are both drawn to books, and we've rattled off a few already on this episode here. And I would just say gravitate toward the books that resonate with you on leadership, that speak to you. There's tons out there. There really is. And, you know, one of my core values is learn something new every day. So I spend an hour learning something new every day, and sometimes repeat stuff because we got to hear it a second time. So for me, you know, if that resonates with you as the listener, to read books or listen to books that inspire you or are going to help you develop your own unique leadership style. You know, I think that, I mean, really recognizing that anyone that we bring on board, they are human first. They're not just a production machine. And to be very vested in their life and their goals, and how can you tie their goals into your company goals that will help accelerate and grow that individual, as well as helping you grow your bottom line, which I'm sure is an objective. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just so many different books out there, really, Austin, and we could probably rattle off a few. I mean, Good to Great is a great leadership book. Leadership versus management. You know, I mean, they're 2 separate things. And I do like the book, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, because it's not just applying the same principles across the board for every single person that you hire on your team. It's having that ability to recognize the individualness. And it's kind of like if you have kids, okay, what and how you convey something to one child isn't how you're going to convey it to the next one. They receive and process data differently and information differently. So it's just really recognizing that. And we're getting really deep again. Here we go. But yeah.
Are there any other notes we should add to the symphony of ideas, ranging from the heuristics and mental models we should be thinking about over here as we're deciding it's time to hire a team, to how do I interview, to how do I prep for training, and then lastly, how do I prepare to lead these new team members? Are there any other notes along those train tracks you'd want to leave the listeners with today?
I think the last thing I could leave for the listeners is that coaching is ongoing. So even though you've gone through the hiring process, you've gone through the onboarding and orientation process, and now this person is growing and developing with you and your company, that the coaching is ongoing. Right. So as this individual grows, to really make either monthly coaching with them, one-on-one, part of your system, and really recognize the individualness within that new hire or that new team member as they grow with you.
Which then presupposes that you, the leader, need to continually evolve in your own thinking, capacity, intellect, proclivity to ideate, etc. Because I think no follower wants to lead someone who is not willing to jump in the trenches ahead of them and pick up, well, I'm going to use a military term, their weapon and charge into the battlefront. So you've got to be willing to do that. And if you're not leading, you're not going to be led. And that requires, like Maxine said, an hour a day of self-study, self-directed learning, taking additional coaching courses yourself, finding your own coach, finding your own programs to involve yourself with, etc. So all great pieces of advice here, Maxine. Well, I want to be sensitive to your schedule, and I also want to drop a note for the audience on a very special upcoming event that you have in October. Now, I don't know if you have any seats left. Tickets may be completely sold out at this juncture. I have no idea. But if you're willing to share about the exciting news you have coming in October, we'd love to hear it.
Well, Austin, yes, the Beauty Business Summit is the most sought after event to come to for a spa professional. It is a 2-day intensive leadership, business, and marketing. And what we do is we take the proceeds from the event and we are gifting a $10,000 grant. So we've given $40,000 so far to a spa business owner, to spa business owners. And so we're delighted to give another $10,000 away this year, and we're rewarding leadership with that. So if you're sitting on a fantastic idea for your business and you're like, you know, $10,000 would really help me jumpstart this really cool idea that would have a positive effect on my business as well as a positive effect in my community, then we want to hear it. So you would go to beautybusinesssummit.org, check us out. There are still seats available, and hope to meet you this October.
Awesome. And that's in which state? So the listeners.
It's in St. Petersburg, Florida. Beautiful.
Gotcha.
West Coast.
So if you're from my neck of the woods in the Pacific Northwest, go check out Beauty. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the URL. Tell us the URL again. It's
beautybusinesssummit.org.
okay. I was thinking .com.org. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest, start looking at flights after you get a ticket if you can find one. And I intend to be there myself. So listeners, I would love to meet you there, provided an asteroid does not hit my my person and I'm unable to attend for some god awful reason, which is very unlikely. But yeah, Maxine, this has been great. I do want to leave the listeners with a way to get in touch with you, as you are the esthetician's coach of coaches by my estimation. So how can listeners connect with you if they want to work with you directly?
Sure. Thanks, Austin. You can certainly send me an email. I personally respond to every single email. It's maxine@maxinedrake.com. You can also go visit my site at maxinedrake.com. I have a lot of free tools and things for you to check out first. If you just go to my free stuff on there, there's all kinds of really cool things to get for free. So yeah, thanks, Austin.
And she didn't mention this, but she is also the author of a fantastic book that I would suggest every esthetician go scoop up a copy of. And the title of it, I'm going to allow Maxine to share the title so that I don't mistakenly butcher the name of it. The
Esthetician's Guide to Outstanding Aesthetics. And it's co-authored with like 17 different industry icons, including Shelley Hancock, Terry Wojak, Becky Keene. There's a bunch of us in there. So that's what's so cool about it. It's not just my book, it's an anthology of different industry icons, and we each have a chapter and kind of share our story. It's very inspirational. I do have my book in some schools and it goes in the kits. So it's, yeah, it was very fun to write.
Yeah, and I've read it. It's a fantastic book. Again, the Esthetician's Guide to Outstanding Aesthetics, proven techniques from today's industry icons. And Shelley Hancock, who has also been on the show, episode 49. We did a fantastic episode, mostly her fault. If you want to check that out, again, it's episode 49. I'll drop a link to the book in the show notes as well if people want to pick up a copy of that, which I don't plug books generally, but this is a book that every Esty needs to read, in my opinion. So there you have it. Well, Maxine, I've enjoyed our time together today, and I'm sure we'll have you on again here soon because there's more to talk about. There is more to talk about. Awesome.
Thank you, Austin.
Of course. We'll catch you later.